activator, ideation, input, command, and positivity. My name is Norma Tirado. I'm Vice President of Culture and People Experience at Centura Health. My biggest aha moment was having command in my top five. And then after I explored what that was, I learned that yes, it's okay to have commands. That means you have presence, you can take control of a situation and make decisions, and also show your vulnerability.
I'm Darren Verasami,
I'm Brandon Miller,
and this is The Strengths Whisperer.
the show empowering leaders to create, build, and sustain great places to work.
On this episode, we have Norma Tirado, the Vice President of Culture and People Experience at Centura Health. Norma, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hi, Darren. It's really great to be here with you today.
We're really excited about what we have to chat about. And as always, you have taken the Clifton Strengths Finder. And if I'm not mistaken, you had taken it previously about 10 years ago, or is that correct?
I did. I took it about 10 years ago. And then I took it recently because I had it as part of a leadership class that I was teaching. And I was surprised to have different strengths this second time around.
Yeah, I think you had shared your results from 10 years ago, and you'd had activator, self-assurance, significance, maximizer, relator that were from 10 years ago. And then you had some pretty significant changes on this one. Some of those were still there. We had activator in the mix still. Was there any from your top 10 that surprised you when you retook it this time?
Yeah, this time I had, like you said, activator, ideation, input, command, and positivity, all of which I was like, great, except command. I was just surprised because I like to think of myself as the type of leader that engages other people and gives people a lot of autonomy. So I really had to look at it and say, why am I command? I always relate that word to the command and control structure of leadership, which I am completely against.
So that's really an interesting point because oftentimes with these Clifton Strengths words, we hear a term like command, we hear a term like empathy, strategic. We have these connotations of what those words are and what they mean. As you dug and you came to understand what command meant for you, did it resonate or do you have any questions?
When I looked at it closer, and it talked about having presence or being able to take control of a situation or the ability to make decisions, then I went, okay, well, that's not so bad. And I think since I've been in positions of upper management or senior leadership for so many years, you're used to making decisions. If there's a situation that's going awry, you jump in and you take charge. So I think that's where the command came from. And reading it and looking at it made me feel a little bit more confident. And when I read the whole explanation, I said, yeah, that is absolutely right. It talks about being willing to go into unknown territory, taking chances, taking control of situations, brainstorming out loud with people. And those are all things that I absolutely do all the time.
And command is one of those Clifton strengths, Norma, that if we took an average of everybody that has taken the Clifton Strengths Finder, particularly across the United States right now, what we would find is that most frequently the command strength occurs in the 30 through 34 position. So when we have it up in our top five or in our top 10, it's kind of a big deal. And it's one of those strengths that when we hear that word command, like you said, we have a connotation that comes with it. But when we dig a little bit further, there is that ability to speak up, to take charge, to keep us moving forward. And it injects leadership into teams and into organizations. It's actually fascinating in the fact that it's very comfortable pushing back in situations and not doing that out of a place of conflict for the sake of conflict. It's comfortable pushing back and saying, hey, I'm not sure I'm seeing completely eye to eye with that. And asking me to further explain that position. It's intended to be from a place of clarification. And what's interesting with leaders that have command in their top 10, they're comfortable when others ask them that. In fact, they'd rather have a little bit of healthy dialogue and healthy pushback. It might have some passion behind it, but it's not a character takedown or anything along those lines. It's we're having this discussion. In fact, if you're working with a leader with command, oftentimes what brings them harmony is the ability to ask questions, to push back and go through that. They actually really respect and appreciate that. Is any of that true for you? Does any of that resonate for you?
I would say, Darren, that if you were at a leadership meeting, when it's me and my leaders, we engage in um, dialogue that often has healthy conflict, right? I encourage my team members and my leaders to disagree with me when they see something that I may not see. Because one of the things that I know about myself is that I'm not a detail oriented person. So I need people to not be afraid to challenge me, because they don't, we are going to miss some things, because I am more thinking about the big picture and not thinking so much about the details. So I need to have that command so that people say, yeah, we can disagree with Norma and it's okay. We can have healthy discussions and disagreements. And because of that, we'll have better results. If they were not disagreeing with me, if they were not challenging me on a regular basis, we would probably not turn out the good products and services that we turn out right now.
In successful teams, Norma, trust, as you know, you're a very seasoned veteran in leadership. Trust is foundational. Would it be fair to say that for you, with this command strength, somebody's ability to have healthy conflict, to put a differing idea on the table and have that discussion is actually a key to building trust with you and within the team?
It is. I joke with my team members that I shouldn't allow them to argue with me so much because they contradict me all the time. And so we joke around that if somebody comes into our meetings and they see how we interact with each other and they don't know the nature of our relationship, they may think that we're arguing or fighting. But what we're doing is we're creating together.
That's right.
And there's a saying out there, if everybody always agree, only one person's doing the thinking. And I need all the people on my team to be doing the thinking. I can't have just a portion of my team doing the thinking or just me doing the thinking. It's just not going to be as good as if all of us contribute.
That's absolutely true. And that's critical for a leader that has command in their top 10. Now, I want to actually ask you because Activator stayed with you. Why do you feel like that one might still be there? How does that show up now versus the version of you 10 years ago?
I think in my leadership journey, I have been challenged to implement some things that really required people to be inspired to be able to achieve beyond their expectations and beyond our expectations, because we were asking so much of people. So I think I needed to really dig in and find ways to take all of these great ideas that we wanted to implement as an organization and turn them into action, and do that by mobilizing people to see themselves, to see their gifts, to challenge themselves. I always tell my people, I am not committed to their comfort, I'm committed to their growth. So I am going to give them challenges, and they will often achieve more than what they even thought they were capable of achieving. And I think that's the activator in me. It's just the ability to really inspire people to look inside of themselves, dig deep, find their gifts, and then share their gifts with the organization. And I think if you talk to anybody that's worked for me over the last 20 years, worked with me, they would say, this is what Norma tells us. And that's what we do, right? We will put challenges in front of people that helps them stretch and help them find what they're really good at and develop and achieve, I think, oftentimes to their own surprise.
That's it. And when we think of that, I'm reminded of that quote: there's no comfort in the growth zone and there's no growth in the comfort zone. So that's really powerful to think of from the leadership perspective of how we are actually the catalyst and the spark for growth of developing that next wave of leadership and team members beyond us. That is the legacy, and that is really the true nature of a leader, is what happens not only while you're there, but what happens when you're not there, right? What happens when you're not in that role? How's that organization been changed, that impacted that team? Jumping between activator and command, the last question I wanted to ask you on command was, in regards to that one, you talked about how activator was there. You could see how it's been there. How have you seen the journey? So when you replay the tape from where you're at today to where you were when you took this 10 years ago, what were some of the pivotal points that maybe sparked command to rise up? Because we have talked about in previous episodes how a strength can be nurtured as well. And over time, as we go through transitions in our career, it is good to retake this periodically every 2-3 years or when we've had some major shifts. Do you have any impetus for where you saw signs of command starting to grow?
With command, I think that there were requirements for me in my job that required me to take control of a situation and increase my level of confidence in myself. And part of increasing that level of confidence in myself was to be able to show vulnerabilities, to admit when I didn't know what I didn't know, and then surround myself with people that could help build on those areas that I wasn't strong in, and be able to admit that, say that to my team, and then build their confidence by, letting them know that they don't have to know everything about everything, because we're a team, and a team takes the strengths of everybody on the team into consideration and build on those strengths, and you find people to complement you. I know I'm not detail oriented, so I know I have to bring people in my on my team that love detail, that love digging in and finding what may be wrong with the project that we're trying to accomplish, so that we can correct before things become a problem. So I think the two things is having, some large organizational projects that required me to really build my confidence, and also then being able to be vulnerable and be vulnerable with my team.
I love the fact that vulnerability is part of your blueprint that's gotten you here. And I want to tie that back to the fact that you'd said, oh, when you first saw command, you thought, oh, command and control and this thought process. What do you say, Norma, to somebody that's listening who's kind of working on growing as a leader, but who might have been taught, hey, you can't be vulnerable as a leader? How can actually being vulnerable help you to grow massively and grow your influence and your impact massively?
Well, where we are as a country, as an organization, as the world right now, we're going through some major transformation. We're requiring change to, engage in change and innovate. And for that to happen, you have to try a lot of things, and a lot of them are not going to stick, right? So you have to be comfortable with making mistakes. And as a leader, if you cannot admit when made a mistake, or when you tried something and it didn't work, then your team is going to be unwilling to do the same. So vulnerability is absolutely a strength for leadership, and not one that comes naturally to most people. So you really have to be intentional about it. And you have to sometimes find the stories that show that it's okay to fail. It's okay to make a mistake as long as you learn from it.
That's right.
And you use that to make you better and stronger.
Fail stands for first attempt in learning, right? And it
Mhm.
is such a powerful point that you're highlighting here for listeners that wrestle with should I be vulnerable or not? Vulnerability is a form of strength. So when we talk about being strengths whisper, when we talk about our strengths results and these different elements, it's easy to get hung up and think that, oh, we just play to our strengths and we ignore our weaknesses. Now, actually, being in a place of strengths is owning our gap areas, because when we're vulnerable, it actually invites others to show up strong and fill in those gaps. And then we can do the same. So it brings that team together. It actually has the ability to be magnetic in what we do. So much good stuff in that area. I want to change gears just a little bit, Norma. Now, as a leader, you have been a culture connoisseur, shall we say, right?
Mhm.
Like, you have been a culture creator in organizations that you've had the privilege of working with, consulting into, and whatnot. You have a framework, your 3 B's for a healthy culture. Can you tell us a little bit about what those are?
I may be a culture connoisseur now because I've made a lot of mistakes in the past and I've learned, I think, what's important, right? I heard the other day, somebody defined culture as how to get shit done. You know, in an organization, strategy is what you do, and culture is how you do it, right?
Yeah.
So the 3 B's to me is, what do you need to do to help our team members, our associates, our employees get to a place of full engagement? And to me, it's the 3 B's. It starts with belonging. People need to feel like they belong to your organization. And by that, I mean that they are able to be fully themselves, that they don't have to hide behind some kind of mask and pretend to be somebody that they're not, just to fit into your organization. You want to bring diverse perspectives. You want to be inclusive. That's why, or Darren, you're probably too young to remember that, but there were times when we didn't allow people to have tattoos or rings or nose rings or things like that. And I remember having a conversation with one of my CEOs saying, "Oh, one was I went to an organization. I worked in an organization where we could not have earrings that were longer than 1 inch." I don't know who came up with that, but I said to our CEO, I said, if we don't change this, you're not going to get a Puerto Rican like me working for you. Because I like big earrings, okay? And what does it hurt for me to have big earrings? Or we used to say that people had to cover their tattoos. I looked at some research and we asked patients, because I work in healthcare, asked patients what was important. And they didn't care whether people had tattoos or purple hair. They wanted to be treated with love and compassion. So the first thing that we have to do as an organization is allow people to feel and be themselves. And then when people feel like they're part of you, being exactly who they are, then they can believe in your mission, vision, and values. And they can tie their own personal mission, vision, and values to your organization's personal mission, vision, and values. And that's where I coined the term believe. And then lastly, become. Because if people feel like they belong, they believe in your mission, vision, and values, and they can tie it to their own personal mission, vision, and values, then they can become the best version of themselves that they can be. They can bring their best ideas, their best effectiveness, their best productivity. And then you continue to develop that. And you tell them, I see you, I believe in you, I trust you. And here's what we're going to do to develop you. And that's why you know, I do all this. And at the end, I'm like, what I said earlier, I'm not committed to your comfort. So at that third stage of becoming, that's when you challenge people to do things beyond what they thought they could do, to go beyond their expectations
Yeah.
and to continue learning and growing.
Let's go over those 3 again. They're belong, believe, and become. And that framework can really create transformation, and it has for you. And in your healthcare experience, I think what's fascinating, bringing this full circle, Norma, is you have managed the electronic medical records side, shifting into the clinical world. So you've been on this convergence of riding this wave of technology needs to move us forward to advance how we're performing. And sometimes culture and the people side has to catch up. So, can you tell us a little bit about what that convergence has been like in getting culture to transform? Because you're kind of right at that sweet spot, or sometimes I imagine challenging spot of where those two are converging. What's it been like to be in the midst of that over your career and using your
Yeah.
strengths to manage through that?
Yeah, I've had over time led both our information technology departments at the same time that I was leading our human resources departments. So I was leading both technology and people for the organization. And the bottom line is moving forward, or, probably for some time. Change management, technology implementations are all about how do you manage, how do you help humans work through this process? You humanize the technology experience and you add technology to the human experience. So, for example, right now, our lives are surrounded by technology. Outside of work, we're all on our phones. We do a lot of things that in the past we were talking to somebody to do or driving somewhere to do it. We do that now in our phones and our computers. And sometimes in the workplace, we haven't caught up with some of those things, and we want to continue to do things the way we used to do it. And a lot of times people will say, well, if you implement technology, aren't you taking away the human? No, what you're doing is you're allowing technology to do the things that technology can do so humans can do the things that technology cannot, which is build relationships, show compassion, do all of the things that require those soft skills that I believe are really the hardest skills to have as in an organization, to solve conflicts, to work through dilemmas in the workplace, to think about possibilities. And so we have to merge the advancements in technology with bringing humanity into the workplace. They're interrelated and interconnected.
So often, as we're touching technology, it almost feels like we're trying to create a technological solution for everything, right? Like, oh, we can
Mhm.
solve that with technology. There are things that are very much, to your point, uniquely human, and we have to make sure that we are clear in carving those pieces out, and that's going to be the genius. Do you have, just based on your experience with that, Norma, any just insights for a leader that might be managing through that in their organization on the what, the how, something tactical in terms of how they could be looking at that to get their people to move forward, to get into that space of advancing along that. So we're creating that alignment.
What I tell leaders is humanize your technology goals. So let's say when we implemented the electronic medical record, I think it would be very typical of an organization to set a goal as implementing the technology on time and under budget. I think we all have that goal. Anytime we make a technology implementation, we want to do it on time and we want to do it under budget. How does that inspire your people doing the implementation? Really doesn't, right? It really doesn't. What inspires them is to try to find a connection, a personal and an emotional connection. So when we were implementing the electronic medical record, for example, our goal was you still have to do it on time and on budget, right? That's a given. But our goal to inspire people what that this technology was going to be used to reduce medical errors so that their families could be safe, so that we could reduce the harm that had been occurring in hospitals for some time because of sometimes human errors, misunderstanding handwriting or things like that. So we set our goal to connect deeply with the fact that by doing this in our community, their families would be safer. And we posted pictures of our families all over the place as a reminder that this technology implementation was going to be to improve their lives. That's the bottom line of that technology. What's the bottom line of the technology? Let's say like an enterprise resource system well, it is to make it easier for people to find information that they need about their own lives, like their paycheck, their payroll information, how much PTO they have. So we need to find that emotional connection, that personal interest that people have, that's a human interest when we're implementing technology. So I always say, think of your goals and humanize them. Find a way to connect emotionally the technology that you're implementing with the interest of the humans that you're serving.
If ever in my life I have heard a better just discussion that reveals what the belief strength is, your number 7, it was right there, Norma. So belief as your number 7 is guided by strong core values. And it's the strength that guides us towards execution, right? And it guides us towards what we will execute upon, what we will partake in, and importantly, what we will not get involved in if it goes against core beliefs and core values. So when we put that strength in a leadership chair, it has the ability to inspire action by aligning people along the lines of these shared values, creating that emotional connection. It's going to be different for different leaders, but belief always will take us back to the core mission and values of what we're doing. Belief is the strength that will have somebody that's in the hospital as a janitor being able to articulate their importance in line with making sure that that hospital is sanitary and taken care of for the health of all patients and the wellness, and making sure that as many patients are going home in a timely manner as possible, right? And what you just articulated there was the power of a leader that has belief. That was just beautiful to listen to. And I could hear it. I could feel it. I was like ready to come work for you. I was like, wow, what do I do? How do I sign up?
That's the
To get
that's
on
the good
board.
part of belief. The bad part of belief is I could be stubborn.
So and this is true. These are the elements that come with the strengths, right? So these are the vulnerabilities, right? They can be our greatest assets and our greatest liabilities, right? Because we can get so anchored and entrenched in them that we can end up, not operating in the best. And all of them have that capacity. But belief, it sounds like, has been an anchor in your healthcare journey.
It has. I mean, I think that's probably why healthcare is a good place for me to be, because my values and the values of the healthcare organizations that I have worked for are very similar. I'll give you an example. I believe in honesty, but I don't believe in brutal honesty. I believe in being compassionate and loving and caring. And I talk about love in the workplace all the time. And some people like look at me weird, but it's we have to take care of people so that they can take care of our patients, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big value for me. And I will go to my grave working with a passion to make workplaces more human and more inclusive, and helping people become more resilient in the workplace, because we have workplaces today we're moving fast and furious, and it can burn people out. So all of that, I think it's important. Those are the values that I carry and that I work with my teams on, and help leaders hopefully embrace those. I this organization that I'm with, Centura, I looked at their values when I was interviewing, and they had the value of imagination, and I immediately said, that's an organization I want to work for, because they had all the other, integrity, compassion, all of that.
Yep.
And then I saw imagination, and I'm like, yes, that's very much aligned with my values.
That is home. That is home for you. Norma, it's hard to believe we're coming towards the end of our time together. I want to ask you, how can a leader just dig into their team strengths and help harness that power? And what can that do for them and an organization when they do that? Because you're clearly doing that right now.
I like to know my team's strengths so that we can play to those strengths, right? And I like to look at a picture of everybody on the team, where everybody's at, so that we can, as we're assigning projects, as we're working on different things, we can look for the people that have the strengths to make those projects more successful for the organization. So I am a firm believer that we spend too much time as humans looking at what's wrong with us and not enough time on what's right with us. And I think that I became a much better leader when I was able to say to myself, this is what I'm good at. And yeah, I'm not so good at that. And I may never be good at that, but I can find others with a strength that can complement my skill sets, and we'll make a better team. It's really hard to improve on your weaknesses. You can minimize them, but it's just so much easier to just play onto your strengths and play onto the strengths of your team members. Think of a feedback session with a team member. And I think in the past, appraisals were focused on telling people what was wrong with them. When you focus on their strengths, and you can have a session with a team member when you can focus on what's right with them, think about the change in attitude for that person and their work. It brings more positivity to the workplace. And as humans, we're tough on ourselves. So I think we just need to turn things around a little bit more and focus on what's right with us rather than what's wrong.
When we first started 34 Strong 10 years ago, one of the things that we would say is fix what's wrong by focusing on what's right, because you could reveal where those places are. And your point is so important that we're going to go much further by focusing on our strengths and then managing around those weaknesses. That being said, it's human nature to focus on the areas of weakness. So we have to consciously be reminding ourselves, what are the strengths of this person? What are my strengths? It actually starts with us. It's the self-awareness that then moves to team awareness. And this is not something that just ends. You check the box, you do it one day, you discover your strengths, and then everything's good. It's kind of like if you're going to eat healthy or you're going to exercise, all those sorts of things. It's the rituals that you have that allow you to get further and further in that journey individually and then within a team. Norma, truly been a pleasure having you on. If people wanted to learn more about you, follow you, connect with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn and friend me and send me a message. Let me know that you were listening to this podcast, and I will certainly connect with you.
Fantastic. And we will have the link to your information and to your LinkedIn in our show notes as well for people to connect. Norma, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story of being a people first leader. For our listeners out there, are you ready to discover your strengths to accelerate into a life like Norma has? We believe in this path so much that we are offering our listeners the opportunity to discover their top 5 Clifton strengths. And all you have to do is email us at Brandon, BRANDON, at the number 34strong.com. Once again, that's Brandon at 34strong.com. And you want to include in that subject line, top 5, to request your Strengths Finder code. I want to thank you again so much for joining us today on the Strengths Whisperer. We will see you soon.